for being part of our foundation. Thanks for helping others. Thank you for sharing the wealth. What's wealth? Wealth is information. Wealth is knowledge. Wealth is action. If you only have one thing, money, knowledge, or a good experience with money, what would you choose? If you could only give your child one thing, money, we're going to give you a pile of money, or we're going to give you some knowledge, a whole bunch of knowledge, or we're going to give you an experience. What is the most useful thing to give your children? Well, it's not the money. You give them the money, it's like giving them the keys to the Ferrari. They're going to go pile it up in the pile. Number two is you can give them the manual. Go read this about this, go read this about, and then go drive the Ferrari, crash. Or you can take them to the church parking lot where there's nobody in the parking lot and you can teach them how to drive. What is your goal? Your goal is to teach them how to drive. And so in this section, we want to talk about two things. We're going to talk about the 4 ways to invest in the stock market. We're going to talk about how to invest in the stock market. And then we're going to talk about, do you lose money? Do you lose money when your stock goes down in value? Everybody's watching the stock market. It's going up, it's going down, and you are riding a roller coaster. So we're going to talk about those two things right now. So there are 4 ways to invest in long-term stock. Now, why do we start with stock? Because you can start very, very simply and very quickly. So let's go to our board here and let's have some fun with this. And remember, as we talk about the different ways to do this. Hold on just a second. My pad is stopped. Okay, good. Hold on a second. Let's see if I can get that baby to work again. Nope, it's not going to work. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to come out here and we're just going to talk you through it. So when we talk about the 4 ways to invest, there are 4 ways to do it. And when we talk about the 7 steps or the 7 habits, step number 4 is to automatically invest. Make more money, separate it, give, automatically invest. Talk about automatically invest. Now, what do we mean by automatically invest? We automatically take money out of our savings account or our checking account, which is step number 5, save and invest. We're going to take money out of that and we're going to dump it into our investment account on a monthly basis. You're just going to pull it right out and it's going to go into a whole separate account. And it's going to go into a stock account. Now, when you open up a savings account or a checking account, you are basically loaning money to the bank. And the bank's not paying you anything. They're taking your money and guess what? They're not putting it in their vault. It's not just sitting there. They're taking that money as soon as they get it and they're loaning it to somebody else. They're either buying government bonds with it where they're getting like a 3 to 5% rate of return and they're paying you nothing. Or they're loaning it to somebody on a car or a house or a credit card. That's what the bank's doing. So as soon as you put money in the bank, you're loaning money to the bank. And that's how you open up a checking account. An investment account is similar to that. You can open an investment account with GoTrade or Robinhood, Fidelity, Schwab, or any of these other places. And it works the same way. You can actually write checks on these. You can use it as your main account. I don't suggest you do, but you can. And you can do something very differently. You can also invest. There's 2 things you're going to do. You're going to either loan or you're going to own. You're going to loan or own. So when we talk about loan or own, just remember that you're loaning money to the bank. You can buy a certificate of deposit, which says, hey, we'll give you a 3 to 5% rate of return, but you got to leave it in for 6 months. And guess what? If you do it at the bank and you need that money and you take that money out first, before the 6 months, they're going to whack you. They're going to take probably half of that money out of your account and you won't have access to it, which kind of stinks. That's not very good. So that's why you need an investment account. Banks are not your friends. Banks take your money and they loan it out to other people. One of the credit unions that I do a lot of work with, they have $500 million in savings accounts where they're paying their people zero. 500 million. What do they do with that money? They turn around and loan it out. They buy government bonds at 5%. That brings them in $25 million a year just in government bonds. It's just totally, totally safe. So you can loan and own. So if you want to own, you need to open up an investment account, GoTrade, Robinhood, or something else. And that allows you to either buy treasury bills, and you can still get that 4 or 5% rate of return, but it's only on a 7-day. You only have to have it in there for 7 days in most of these cases. Okay. So if you want a loan on a short term, you need an investment account. You can also own. You can own things. You can own stock, and you can own. Uh, that's the main thing we're going to talk about with an investment account is you can own stock. Now, there's four ways to invest in the stock market. And again, the reason that we start with the stock market is because all of you can start fast and quick. And I want you to become an investor. As soon as you I remember I talked to my dad when I had my first $100 in my investment account. He says, congratulations, you are a $100 heir. You don't have to wait to be a millionaire. You're a $100 heir or a $10 heir. You can start out and whatever you got in there, that's how we're going to get started. Now, there are four ways that you can invest in the stock market. And again, we want to add businesses. We want to add more and more layers to this skeleton of 7 habits and these skeleton of 7 steps. And we want you to own real estate. We want you to own businesses. There's all kinds of wonderful things you want to be able to do. But if you have $100, asset allocation, we want you to take a little bit of that. Let's say that you want to put some of it into bonds, so you take maybe 30% of that and put it into bonds. And then let's say that you want to take 60% of that and split that up into different stocks. And then take 10% of it and pick and choose. Now, we don't recommend it, but if some of you love that and some of you like being on the front of that roller coaster, and so you can pick and choose. Now, there are four ways that you can invest in long-term stock. Now, the biggest question people have is they're watching the stock market and the value is going up. Why does the stock market go up and why does it go down? Why does it go up and why does it go down? Well, there's multiple reasons. One is the company making more money. If it's making more money, it all comes down to supply and demand. What is the supply and what is the demand? So if you have a lot of people that want to own that stock, so you got more buyers than you got sellers, a bunch of people want it, well, that's going to go up in value. If you have 10 apples and you got 10 people that want to buy an apple, well, they can all buy, then you got 1-to-1. But if you've got 10 apples and you've got 20 hungry people, well, guess what? The price of those apples are going to double. They're going to go up because you got more people. Okay, does that make sense? But if you've only got 5 people, your demand is lower. There's only 5 people, and guess what? There's 10 apples. Well, then the price is probably going to go down. So supply and demand, that's a huge part. So money moves from different areas. It moves from cash, it moves to treasury bills, it moves to stock, it moves to different individual stocks. People are moving their money. Some of them are put it into crypto, some are taking it and put it into real estate, whatever it is. And so supply and demand is a law. And so we want you to understand that. But the reason we start with people with the stock market is because it's so fast and quick and you can do it very quickly. So there's 4 ways to be able to do that. Number 1 is you pick and choose. You can pick and choose, but if you pick and choose, you lose. You pick and choose, you lose. Now, take 10% of your money and go pick and choose. And when you're smarter than the 500 biggest companies in America or smarter than Warren Buffett's team, he's got a massive team that does this, then we'll do it that way. Okay. And it's okay to get in the front of that roller coaster and have fun going up and down that roller coaster. And if you own one stock, guess what? That roller coaster is going to go up and down because supply and demand. People buying it, people selling it, it's in favor, it's out of favor, whatever it is. And some people just love that roller coaster. For most people, they don't like the roller coaster that much. So number 2 way to be able to do it is to hire somebody, to hire a professional manager. And guess what? They're going to pick and choose. The difference is you're going to pay them to do that, and they're probably better at it than you are. And then you're going to pick and choose. Now, you can do that where the fees are pretty low, but most cases they're going to be on the low side, probably 3/4 of 1% all the way up to 2%. And so if you have $100 in there and you made $10, well, they're going to take, $1 to $2 for their money under management, their fee, their ongoing fee. Number 3 is an index fund. Hey, we're just going to own the biggest 500 companies in America. The S&P 500 stands for Standard & Poor's. It was a publishing company that started keeping track of the value. Okay, and then they would sell it. They would sell it in newspapers, and everybody would be watching it. That's how it came to be. But the people who manage that aren't picking and choosing. They're just saying, hey, these are the 500 biggest companies, and they just do the asset allocation that way. So the fees are a lot less. They're about a half a percent. And then there's my favorite, which is Berkshire Hathaway. Berkshire Hathaway is a massive conglomerate. It started out as these massive insurance companies, and they have an insurance company, and they literally are insuring people in their cars and all kinds of things. They take that money and they get to invest it. And so he's got hundreds of billions of dollars of money that's sitting there that they go invest, and they're making really good money on it. And the fees, there's no fees to it. There's a small commission when you buy, but there's no fees that go with it. So the big thing is that if you're buying one stock or you're buying 10 stocks, that roller coaster is going up and down. And where are you sitting? Where are you sitting in that roller coaster? You're sitting in the front row. And if you go to Disneyland, you're sitting in Space Mountain, and there's music and there's sound and it's dark and you don't know where it's going. And if you're younger, you're having a blast. You're having fun. You're sitting in the front seat. Well, I've had enough of that. I don't do that anymore. So I'm more into Berkshire Hathaway, which is not the roller coaster. It's got hundreds and hundreds of companies. It has a lot of money in own. It has a lot of money in loans, and so if you only own one company, it's going to be volatile. If you own 100 companies in an index, it's going to go up and down, but it's not going to be as volatile because there's 100 of them. If you have 500 companies, it might go up and down, but it's not going to be nearly as volatile. And if you don't want to get on the roller coaster, just buy bonds. Okay, you can just buy bonds. So let's talk about the difference between Berkshire Hathaway and the S&P 500. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you to the report. And one of the great things about Berkshire Hathaway is they have an annual meeting, and that annual meeting is coming up. That annual meeting is in the first Saturday of um, it's on the first Saturday of May, and we're going to be watching that. We're going to be watching that, and that comes in the first Saturday of May. And so what Berkshire's done is that it's a stock. It's a stock. It's started out as insurance companies, and then they've owned all kinds of stuff. But this is how they've done comparative to the S&P 500. Okay, so if you look at this, I'm going to make that much bigger here so you can see it. Okay, let's see if I can spin that over. Okay, perfect. All right, so here's what he's doing. He took over in 1965, and this isn't about Warren Buffett. He's got a massive team that does all of this stuff. Walt Disney did not build Disneyland. Walt and Roy Disney built a team that built Disneyland. Steve Jobs did not build the iPhone. Steve Jobs and Tim Cook and a whole team built the iPhone. And Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and that whole group built a team that is Berkshire. They've got all these people that are doing all these incredible things. And so when Warren passes away or retires, you're not gonna see it a blip. In fact, you can see that Apple has done better after Steve Jobs handed it down, and Disneyland did much better after Walt and Roy were gone because the other guys didn't have the same inklings, and because they were in the startup mode. Those guys were in startup mode. Then the new guys came in and says, "Hey, we're just going to leverage this and make it all work." But this is how well it's done. This is that really kind of crucial. So you can see starting in 1965 that they had a big year, and that's versus the S&P 500. Now, some years right there, they both lost a little money in 1966. They had a massive year. So this is why you can't time the market. You got to stay in the market. So you can see that they had a massive year that year. It went down in half. Something happened in 1974, and it went down in half. Here they made 100% on their money in that one year, which is pretty phenomenal. But the big difference is looking at it compared to the S&P 500. The S&P 500 has fees, and these guys have just done, so that whole team's had a few years where it's just gone bonkers. Right there, 69% versus 21% this year. Then the next year, guess what? He lost. You know, but he's never had a 10-year period, and that whole team's never had a 10-year period where they've got a net loss. And you can see the differences between that on a yearly basis, 1989 all the way down to 1994. So it's got a long track record. Here we are in 1995. And you can see it's got a great track record compared to the S&P. Um, it's even if this and they probably had very similar, but there's no fees attached to it, so he beat them. This year he got beat by the S&P. This year he got beat by the S&P, but this year he clobbered him, did much better. And again, this is part of your asset allocation. But if you want something that's pretty stable, that's these guys because they own all kinds of businesses, they own all kinds of stock, and they have all kinds of cash in there. And you can see on a yearly basis, look at this. This is as you come down here. Um, when they did have a bad year, the S&P lost a lot, but he didn't lose very much at all. And again, I'm not telling you what to do with your money. I'm just trying to advise you what to do when I give you money. And this is what we do. We got a lot of this money in the foundation, and as the foundation makes money, guess what? We give it away. And you can see outperformed that one. They both had a bad year here in 2008. When the financial crisis hit, people were taking their money out. People were taking the money out of the stock and they were putting it someplace else. But it didn't lose as much as the S&P did that year. So this is still a roller coaster, but it's not as big of a roller coaster. And again, if you don't want to get on the roller coaster, just buy bonds, just loan money to organizations, certificates of deposit or treasury bills or something else, and get that 4 or 5%. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't want to get on the roller coaster at all, then don't. But you can see over time, he's consistently beat them. Now, this is the crazy thing. This is the thing that I'm mostly interested in is the rate of return. Now, this talks about their book value. It may not necessarily be exactly to the stock value. This is what the company is worth. And you can see that he's compounding at a very high rate. There's 19% versus the S&P. Now, some years, like I said, there's the S&P had a bad year and he didn't. This year he had a bad year and the S&P was a little bit more even. So this is why we talk about long term. You've got to do this over a long period of time. It's not something you're going to do short term. Now he's been doing this since 1965, and you can see that their rate of return's massive because he had some massive years when it got started, and it was very small. The fund was very small, so they had that ability because the fund was so dang small to be able to get these great rates of return. This is the one I'm looking at right here. And even if that was only 15%, that's still better than what the S&P has done. Okay. So that is the kind of the piece that I wanted to really talk to you about, the difference in them. So the 4 ways to invest, pick and choose. Most likely you're going to lose. I want you to spend not your time in picking and choosing, because some people do that they spend all their time and they're just consumed at it. And I did that for a while. I did about $10 million worth of trades, and I would have been smarter just to put the money in Berkshire Hathaway and worked on my businesses. Okay, that would have been smarter to do. You can pick and choose. You lose. You can hire somebody, but you got to pay fees. The S&P does really well, and it's solid. But my favorite's Berkshire Hathaway because it's got such a long-term track record. Remember, it's supply and demand. How many people are trying to buy and how many people are trying to sell, and how are the businesses doing? Now, he doesn't buy a stock. He says, don't buy a stock unless you're willing to hold it for 5 or 10 years. And one of the things that Buffett says is that if you only got 20 punches and you could only invest in 20 things, and then you could look at it for 10 years or 20 years, what would you invest in? Well, would you invest in something that's where you're gambling and your brother-in-law told you about this hot stock? Here's the problem. Somebody tells you about a hot stock, so you go buy that hot stock, and of course it's a hero to zero. And then you say, well, this is all rigged and I'm getting out of it. And it's a scam. Well, it's a scam because you're a speculator. You're a gambler. We don't gamble. We're not gambling. We are investing, which is a huge difference. Okay, so that is the 4 ways to do the stock market. And again, the reason we like to start with stock is because you can do it with a very small amount of money. Then we go through the whole 7 habits and the 7 steps.